to order. We still have a few people who will be logging on, but as you can see my partial screen here, we did add one piece to the agenda, and we're going to start off with roll call and introducing ourselves to Eric. We're going to spend most of the time with Rails to Trails and thinking about how we can partner together, support their work, and to see how that fits into the old Ohio River Basin Plan. Just have a short piece on the webinar. We had a fascinating webinar today, and we want to announce the next webinar, which is history, which is just one of my passions, and it's just a fascinating Army Corps approach to history. Then we want to talk a little bit, Harry sent out a note about the Ohio River Basin Inspection Tour and seeking people who we can nominate. We aren't scheduling people, we can just nominate individuals. And then we just have a little bit of a small committee discussion, which we can open up into any piece we so choose, but 2 or 3 minutes at the max at the end of it. So far I have 2 folks that are going to say something. And it's just wonderful to have Russ. And this is just, you know, remind everybody this is a committee driven deal. And so feel free. We could put Seth Weed up there because he's just facilitated a fascinating discussion with Fish and Wildlife around fishing education and boating safety education. So had a wonderful crew today. But Russ has developed a neat sort of look at all of the past RTCA projects in the Ohio River Basin. And then Perry's going to talk about greenways and blueways and a little bit of their committee and how they might join with Russ, but then a conference. And then we'll end up with anything else we want to talk about. Anything else to add to the agenda? We just want to go around and we're going to introduce ourselves. And one thing that you would wish you would be doing today, instead of sitting in front of the screen, that's your way you're going to introduce yourself. And Russ, you're first. Who are you, Russ?
Russ Clark from National Park Service, Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program, and field office in Kentucky. And I would rather be out landscaping right now than sitting in front of a computer.
Bridget?
My name is Bridget Taylor. I'm an environmental scientist at Osenko. I collect water quality samples with them. It's a water quality monitoring program, and then also I'm the GIS person, basically. But I just bought a new bike recently, so I would rather be biking, which I will after this meeting.
All right, Harry Stone.
Harry Stone, I chair the Ohio River Basin Alliance, and I'd rather be kayaking and canoeing with my grandchildren.
Perry Thomas.
Perry Thomas with the Kentucky Division of Water. I'm a river basin coordinator for the area that includes Louisville. And after this meeting, I'm looking forward to going for a wildflower hike with my dog in Cove Springs Park here in Frankfort, where I'm based.
All right, Trish.
There we go, it unmuted. Trish Howson from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, with a education innovation nonprofit, and probably rather be kayaking because we're 80 degrees today after we were like 30 2 nights ago. But I will get there later this week.
Risa.
Risa Shimoda with the River Management Society in Tacoma Park, Maryland, and there's no place I would rather be than right here.
Well, it looks like you had a nice stream there, Risa. Victor.
There I am. Vic Elam, Refuge Manager at Ohio River Islands National Wildlife Refuge. I think I'd rather be biking as well, along with Bridget on that one.
Seth Wheat.
I'm Seth Wheat with the Kentucky Department of Tourism. Eric, I think we may have run across each other in a past life a few years ago, but I do adventure tourism for the state, outdoor recreation, among a few other things, and turkey hunting right now. It is turkey season in Kentucky. It is a very nice day to be outside.
All right, Brewster.
Hey, Brewster Rhodes, good to see you, Eric. And where I'd rather be, geez, where I have better internet access on the roads up here at Lake Erie. Thank you.
Well, we are recording this, and we have several other individuals who will be interested in your talk, Eric. So we'd like to turn it over to you. Just as a reminder, please put ideas in the chat. We save the chat as well. So as you're listening to the presentation, fill up that chat with implications for the Ohio River Basin and what we could be doing and what we want Harry to get money for us. So Eric, with that, we did meet with Eric with several individuals of the Ohio River Basin Alliance and our team. And actually, though, we did pledge and signed on to the legislation that they're proposing. And so I encourage everybody as a ORBA member to consider contacting your legislators to say, this is a good deal. But I think Eric's going to talk a little bit more broadly than just the legislation and, you know, what is the impact for rails trails as we think about the Ohio River Basin. Eric?
Thank you so much, David. Glad to be here and good to see a few familiar faces and meet those of you that I haven't before. I am the Midwest Regional Director for Rails to Trails Conservancy. I'm based in Yellow Springs, which is Southwest Ohio. I've been with the organization for 14 years, and Rails to Trails Conservancy is just over 35 years old as an organization now. We are the largest trail organization in the country. We've got about 130,000 members nationwide. We've got about a million email addresses so when we need to target advocacy at the local, state, and federal level, we can be really annoying. And when I say we, it's those million email addresses, which is what you need to be as an advocacy organization. Being a pest is what we are supposed to be, and I think we do a pretty good job of it. I'm going to walk through a series of tabs. I'm going to share my screen now, and I've been doing this quite a bit lately. Instead of creating a PowerPoint presentation where you guys all know this, where you end up stealing screenshots and pictures and all of that off of a million different websites that you use or this or that. I'm just going to walk you through the websites. I find myself getting more annoyed with creating PowerPoints when I can really just go to the source and show you what I want to talk about anyway. So I'm going to start by just talking a little bit about our work in the Ohio River Basin region, and then I'll transition over to the opportunity happening right now as far as legislation at the federal level and what the latest lay of the land there is, and I really do think it's a huge opportunity. So I'll start with our work. We've really transitioned in about the last 8 years from an organization that did a lot of retail work, one-on-one with communities to help them get trails built. And in case you're wondering, we are strictly a multi-use trail organization. We don't work on hiking only trails. We don't work on mountain bike trails. It is walking, biking, not all rail trails. We'll work on greenways and other multi-use trails as well, but only multi-use. We don't work on single-use type trails. And what we've really done is transition from that retail approach that got the organization started. And we're really looking now at connectivity and systems. We a lot of times will use the phrase networks and spines. So it's networks in metro areas and then the long distance spines that create or that connect communities. And the rationale behind that really is trails are no longer this new concept that 35 years ago there was a lot of convincing and a lot of people didn't really understand what the point was. That's not really necessary anymore. It can be on a project by project basis, but our organization is not our time is best not spent on those one-on-one retail type projects. So what we've tried to do as a national organization is look for examples of these network and spine type projects that are happening and have geographic diversity and real diversity of scope and diversity of challenges, and try to create templates and case studies for people all over the country to use. Essentially, create a way for the trail community to learn from the mistakes and successes of others. And so what you're seeing is this landing page of what we branded Trail Nation. These are these network and spine projects that we are now concentrating our efforts on. Within that portfolio, there's actually a few, a couple main ones, but I'm going to concentrate on the Industrial Heartland Trail Coalition because its overlay within the Ohio River Basin is pretty obvious, right? That doesn't take a whole lot to see why your footprint and the footprint of this particular project have some commonality. This is really an evolution of a 25-year-old discussion, but the name and brand of Industrial Heartland Trails Coalition came about 7 years ago. And this is 1,500 miles of envisioned multi-use trail, touches on 4 states, 51 counties. It's about 53% complete. We've been working with folks. You can see Pittsburgh kind of plays a bit of a hub there, right? But been working with people on all of these major corridors again for about the last 7 years. We're wrapping up our 3rd and final detailed corridor feasibility study for this Ashtabula to Pittsburgh corridor right now. But we're constantly, there's over 100 different organizations involved in this particular project, from public agencies to nonprofits to advocacy groups, you name it, and they're involved in some way, shape, or form. We are really, after playing a key role in launching this coalition and really trying to help identify lay out the vision as the opportunity and then identify what the roadblocks to implementation are. We're really taking a strategic pivot starting this year to start working at the state level on some systemic change around existing and potentially new funding, management, and maintenance programs to help kind of bolster the efforts to get some of these gaps filled in. Of course, at the same time, if we have success at the state level in creating some meaningful systemic change in the way that that these programs are delivered, that's going to, the benefits will be much wider than just this particular vision. They would trickle down to really any trail project around. So when I was asked to come do this presentation, I asked if I could get a GIS layer of what the definition that you use is ORBA. What is the Ohio River Basin? And so again, thank you for that shapefile. And our GIS manager quickly just created this little dashboard for me. And within the boundaries of the Ohio River Basin, there's currently 4,228 miles of multi-use trail that we have mapped out. We've been spending about the last 20 years, really, when we hired our first GIS staffer, and then bolstering our GIS staff since then, creating what's called TrailLink, which is our online trail mapping and trail finder website. We're over 30,000 miles of trail nationwide on that now. So it's, I will never say that it has every mile of trail because God knows, there's so much out there and people are continually building, which is a wonderful thing. But I will say, I think it's the most exhaustive resource for multi-use trail out there. It's really an amazing resource. So I had Derek throw this together for me, just to show what the status of multi-use trail development within the basin is, and it's pretty impressive. And you can see how some of these long distance, at this scale, you're not seeing the networks necessarily within the metro areas, but you're starting to see those long distance spine connectors. And this part of the country is as rich and as connected in those as any place that there is in the country right now. There's plenty of work to continue trying to get them connected, but at the end of the day, the basin here has a backbone of multi-use trails that it again is as as good as any place in the country. And I think, you know, and that really matters. I mean, the work that Seth does, he understands this. When you're talking about quality of life for your residents and the ability to market the, you know, your communities, your state, and your region as a destination for outdoor recreation and tourism, these things matter. They matter in a huge way. And so finding ways to continually connect them, because the strategies and the opportunities for that kind of marketing change drastically. You know, a 10 or even 20-mile trail is really, that's a tough sell for somebody doesn't live fairly close. You get to 50+ miles of connected trail, and all of a sudden you have an opportunity for marketing, you know, for a regional marketing strategy that really will attract people. You start hitting 100, 200+ miles, and, you know, you've got something that starts to become, you know, nationally and even internationally prominent. The C&O Canal from Washington, D.C. up to Cumberland, which is not in the basin here, but then it meets in Cumberland with the Great Allegheny Passage that goes Cumberland to Pittsburgh. I mean, they're seeing about 1 million uses a year. They're seeing, the last economic impact study on the Great Allegheny Passage was showing about $45 million in direct user spending and wages paid to businesses that directly cater to cycling tourists. So, you know, $40 to $50 million a year maybe doesn't move the needle in a massive metro area, but man, those small Appalachian towns, you're talking about the difference between having a storefront open and having a storefront closed, and that's not a subtle difference. Oh, can I get rid of that share? So, see, this is the limitation here. I'm trying to get the next tab that I want to move over. Here we go. All right. So how in the world are we going to create at the federal level some more opportunity? Because quite frankly, what's missing in the trail network, the pieces that are missing are the harder pieces, right? I mean, like anything else, the easier spots have been done. God, Jack knows this from his work in Cincinnati. The last mile or two, how long has it been trying to get the Oasis done? How long has it been for the Beachmont Bridge? I mean, these iconic big pieces that will finish decades and decades of effort to, you know, to build hundreds of miles of connected trail. It's those last pieces that are so hard and a lot of times so expensive. And so what can we do to accelerate the development opportunity on these trail systems? You know, we get a crack at the transportation bill typically about every 6 years if DC is working the way it's supposed to. We've had hiccups over the years in that, where you get a 1-year extension here and there, or you get a shorter bill like we did with the before the FAST Act. But everything is pointing towards a 6-year reauthorization of the transportation bill. Transportation funding is the backbone of our trail development partnership with the federal government. That's where the transportation alternatives, safe routes to school, and recreational trail fund money is coming through here. And our policy team in DC works, you know, year round, not just during reauthorization. They are working all the time on the Hill, trying to find ways to both create efficiencies within the existing programs, make sure the existing programs are not left behind in, you know, in getting increases in funding, but then also looking at innovative ways to create more opportunity within these large federal bills. So this year's reauthorization, which is essentially front and center now, now that the relief bill has been passed, this, you know, you've been hearing it, the infrastructure is the buzzword and is the name of the game on the Hill right now. Transportation alternative, the existing programs, transportation alternatives is already set to get a pretty nice bump. We'll have to wait and see the appropriation process when they get through appropriations, but it's looking like we'll see a pretty decent increase in that program. The Recreational Trails Fund, which is funded by an excise tax on off-highway motorized vehicles. The FHWA has not recalculated how much gas has been sold to those vehicles in 20 years. Last year, Congress mandated that FHWA do a quick and dirty, not detailed, but a quick and dirty reassessment of the number of gallons of gasoline sold to off-highway vehicles. And in that quick dirty analysis, they found out that 2018 to 2020 numbers were 3 times the amount that they're currently using to set the funding formula. So our ask, and this is not getting a whole lot of pushback, we're feeling fairly optimistic, but the simple ask for Rec Trails this year is do the formula right, follow your own rules. If they do that, which they should, and it sounds like both the House and Senate are on board with making that part of the law, we'll see a tripling in rec trail funding. So whatever your state's getting right now in recreational trails funds, you should be ×3 starting in 2021, hopefully. So that, those 2 core programs, we're feeling pretty optimistic about seeing a bump in resources, and that's helpful. The limitation of the existing programs and the reason that we're in the position we are, which is, hey, great trails, really wonderful advancement in getting trails on the ground in the last couple decades, but we're literally doing them a mile at a time. It is extremely hard. It's not all that efficient, really. And you are doing them one phase of one project at a time. Unless you were lucky in the last half dozen years between Tiger and Build, if you're familiar with those programs run by US DOT, those are competitive grant programs run at the federal level that allow you to package transportation projects and the idea is packaging multiple projects into a larger ask to create to kind of fast forward whatever it is that you think the impact of these projects would have. The problem with them from our perspective is walking and biking amenities, trails were eligible, but you're competing against highways and bridges and interstate. You're literally competing against every other transportation project in the country, and that's pretty tough when you're being judged at US DOT. And typically those people that are judging are not necessarily all that well schooled as to what the impact of walking, biking, and trail projects can be. So you're at a heck of a disadvantage. There's been successful projects through both of those programs. Places like Cleveland, places like St. Louis, places like Toledo have received Tiger and Build trail and active transportation funding, but it's really difficult. So what our staff has been doing really for about the last 4 years, we developed some language, wrote a bill that has been called a few different things over the last few years, but is right now is called the Connecting America's Active Transportation Systems Act. It does have bipartisan support, bipartisan sponsorship, which was huge and necessary to even get it introduced, obviously. So we do have both Republican and Democratic co-sponsors. What this bill would do is create, under the new transportation bill, a program that looks and acts like Tiger and Build and what's now called RAISE. It would be a national competitive grant program administered by the US DOT with a minimum of $10 million and a maximum of $25 million project cost, and it is only for active transportation projects. So what this could do, and the beauty of these programs, Tiger, Build, RAISE, and if we can get Connecting America's Active Transportation Act in, the beauty is it allows you to bundle projects that don't necessarily touch each other physically, but they are part of the same network that you're working on. It also allows you to go across jurisdictions in a way that some of the traditional programs are more difficult. So looking through the lens of, and this is purely hypothetical, right? But it's not insane. Looking through the lens of the Ohio River Basin, or if we wanted to just look through the lens of the Industrial Heartland Trail Coalition project, or really any, you could put together a let's just say hypothetically a $20 million proposal to US DOT under the CATS program that would build a trail along the Ohio River, from, let's say, Parkersburg up to Wheeling, and or pieces of Parkersburg to Wheeling. You could also include rehab of the bridge at across the Ohio River at Market Street in Steubenville. You could package all these different projects that are sometimes in different states even. But as long as you're making the case that this is part of a planned, this is part of a planned network that, you can tackle some big, high dollar, tough projects all at once. And that's just a different way of attacking the challenge that we have. So I think as you think about this as a basin, my goodness, are there ways to work together across jurisdictional lines here? I mean, someday I sure hope we can get Cincinnati and Louisville connected, right? I mean, when you talk about the water trail, which I know is a huge emphasis for a whole lot of people and a huge opportunity, I think that water trail will ultimately be even more attractive and more successful if we can pair it with a multi-use trail on land, right? I mean, how huge would that be to be able to have both a water and land trail along the Ohio River? You want to talk about something internationally important and attractive. My goodness, I probably wouldn't come back to work if that was done. I'd just be out on it. So a couple action items you can see if you scroll through here, and I know David sent out some of the links you can get to the page here. Lots of different organizations, both national, regional, have signed on. There is an opportunity for your organization to sign on as a supporter of this particular bill. Most certainly, you can write, call, whatever means necessary to get in touch with both your congressional representative as well as your senators, and let them know that you want this particular bill supported during reauthorization of the transportation bill. I guess the one thing I did leave out is ideally we are looking to get $500 million a year allocated towards this program. So $500 million a year, again, that would be a national competitive grant program. But you can start making some hay with that if we're serious about accelerating active transportation in this country, this is the old, we have to come up with a better way than the existing programs solely. And so this is the swing that we are taking this year in this reauthorization. It's always an uphill battle, but getting early bipartisan co-sponsorship was huge. I was born and raised in Alaska, so I can't even begin to tell you how shocked I was that the Republican that signed on was Dan Sullivan. Very odd. I don't care why, frankly, but sometimes support comes from the strangest of places, and that appears to be the case here. But we were happy to have him, and then his counterpart Lisa Murkowski also ended up signing on as a co-sponsor. So I'm not sure what that says about us nationally, that the two Republican co-sponsors so far are from Alaska, where I can tell you the multi-use trails are wonderful, but there's a good chunk of the year where if you're biking, you're fat biking only. With that, I'm going to stop my share, and I promised David I'd try not to talk too long, because if you know, any of you that know me know that I can talk. So I'll stop there. Are funds available for planning? Yes, just like Tiger and Build and Raise, we certainly would look, and I believe the language right now is saying no less than 10% of the allotted funding would be planning eligible. So that's not a ceiling, that's a floor. It has to be at least 10% go to planning projects. It doesn't mean there can't be more. And then controversy around e-bikes. To be perfectly honest with you, the chatter amongst advocates and activists is way louder than it is on the ground. My answer to people that ask about e-bike issues is, well, do you have a user issue right now on your trails? Do you have massive conflict with with your trail users? And if they say no, then I say, well, good, you don't have an e-bike issue, because I guarantee you've got e-bikes on your trails. You just aren't paying attention. They're there already. So if you're not seeing huge impacts and huge problems, then guess what? E-bikes aren't going to be the end of the world for trail users. We do have a statement out organizationally. You can find it on our website We support the model e-bike legislation that was passed in Ohio. It's been passed, I think it's now in 24, 25 states. And essentially what it does is it allows class 1 and 2 e-bikes on all multi-use trails, but gives the local jurisdiction that manages those trails the authority to create other rules as necessary, which we're a national organization. We don't manage any trails. We are not in charge of managing, maintaining, programming any trails. And quite frankly, we don't think anybody should be telling those local managers exactly how to do their job. So we do support that model legislation because it does create a way for e-bikes to be legal, but it leaves ultimately the decision-making for the local trail managers where it should belong. All right.
Thank you very much.
Keep this informal. You guys can shoot questions to me.
Anybody have any comments, questions, thoughts?
It's really good stuff, Eric.
Thank you.
I was surprised to hear that the Ohio River Basin has more connected trails than any other basin in the United States. I just surprised.
I was pleasantly, I figured, because I knew what Ohio, Indiana, Western Pennsylvania, pieces of West Virginia, Kentucky, I kind of knew the lay of the land, but to be honest with you, I probably wouldn't have guessed 4,200 miles. That's pretty, I mean, that's not all connected, but 4,200 miles of on the ground multi-use trail within the basin footprint. That's really impressive. That's a lot of trail.
Hey, Eric, great job. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Jack.
Jack, any thoughts about what we as a committee could recommend to Harry and this whole plan that we're putting together? How does one extrapolate, the costs for doing what you did in Cincinnati, but basin-wide?
Yeah, that's the trick, to kind of go 30 or 50,000 feet up and think about it from a more regional standpoint. I think what Eric described and the approach Rails to Trails is taking is spot on. So my initial thought was if ORBA could follow some of those recommendations, rally those congressmen and senators to support those funding bills, that keeps things at a kind of a high level, macro level. Then when you drill down into a metro area like Cincinnati or Louisville, you're getting into project challenges and, mile by mile and all that sort of detailed stuff that's really hard because of a variety of reasons. But looking at it from a basin standpoint, I think keeping the perspective at a macro level, get funding in the pipeline where it should be, get those formulas up to date. That's really seems like common sense, but we've probably missed a lot of opportunities over the last 20 years just because the funding was directed somewhere else.
Eric, this is Harry. I did have just a question or two. I was looking at the site and I did sign up ORBA supporting the letter, but I don't see us in there. And I had also forwarded our logo.
Let me check with the policy team. I'll take a note here to ask them why not. Thank you. Yeah, no, that's
if I did something wrong, let me know how to do it right.
Yep. No, I will. I'll check with them and see why not. That should be easy.
On another issue about support, we just, as I said earlier, got off the phone with Mr. Ames, and he said governor support for the basin is crucial. Has each one of the governors in the basin signed on, or have you had a lot of governors sign on nationally?
No, to be quite honest with you, no. We've been concentrating so hard on the House and Senate and getting these co-sponsors and trying to rally support in the committees, T&I committee and energy committee. So we haven't really worked the state level all that much at all. we've had a few in Ohio, just the Legislative Trails Caucus in Ohio, Legislative Trails Caucus in Indiana. We've had them send out support letters to the congressional delegation and the senators. So there's been some collective work with those trail caucuses, but no direct, nothing hitting up administration really. Although I will tell you, so just of note, since you bring up governors, if you haven't seen or heard, the Governor Holcomb in Indiana just last week announced that $60 million of their TARP relief, the COVID relief funding going to the state of Indiana, they're putting $60 million into their next level trail program, which is their state support for multi-use trail development. So Indiana's putting a big old challenge down to some other states, and we're trying to leverage that at least in Ohio and Wisconsin and Illinois, and say, you're gonna let Indiana beat you guys? a little cross-state shaming is never bad for advocacy.
Yeah, that's the second call in a row where we've heard that.
Hey, I'm all about competitiveness when it comes to.
But other states put their money in water trails. Indiana hasn't yet included water trails in their multi-use trails.
That is
so
true.
We have that on them.
That is true.
And I did want to ask about water trails. I know in the past, some of the DOT money has been used for water trails, because I saw something in the Corps of Engineers that talked about that. Will that be true at all in this bill, or it's strictly terrestrial?
Not in the CATS bill. This would be active transportation. So land multi-use trails, and then obviously there would be on-street type protected bike lane type facilities. But no, this would definitely be land-based.
Hey Eric, a thought. Should Orbit try to communicate with metropolitan planning organizations? So that's OKI in the Cincinnati area. I forget what it's called in Columbus, but anyway, those are the groups that distribute those federal funds. How would you speak to that?
Absolutely, yeah, I think that would be great, and especially the CATS fund. If we got this new program through, it would not, it would be purely administrated at the federal level, but the impact on those MPOs, I mean, they understand the challenges of dealing with the traditional programs. So I even though they wouldn't administer the money, I'm sure they would be huge supporters. I know I was just on a call with Morpsey in Columbus. I mean, it would help them. And then certainly the increase to TA would help them. Those are the funds that they directly administer. So I think them chiming in can only help. And as you know, each one is somewhat autonomous. Some of them are much more willing to advocate for themselves, while others literally still don't understand the difference between advocacy and lobbying, and they just immediately say, "Well, I can't lobby." Oh boy. So yeah, all you can do is educate and hope they'll try to advocate for themselves.
We thank you very much, Eric, for your time and energy, and please forward us any information that you have on Mr. Holcomb, and we'd love to shame Mr. Our current Democratic guy here in Kentucky. We do that. But,
yeah, beat him up. I will. Good. All right. Thanks for having me. This is great. I appreciate it.
And you're more than welcome to stay and listen in if you so choose.
Sure, I will. I until 5 I can. So I definitely
we try to finish by 5. Our next topic of the agenda was, we just had a fascinating discussion by plastics, or about plastics and microplastics and the problems they're facing. And this Ohio River discussion series is taking off. We had over 100 people, not the highest yet. I think Safety on the River was 240 registered. I think we had about 135 registered for this, but 2 good speakers. Next month is focused on the river, and 3 Army Corps folks who are sort of just fascinating crew, and they're very high up in the Corps level. Been John Cheek and Bob Willis. Well, Bob is retired, but he was responsible for all the locks and dams on the Kentucky River. And John, you know, just fascinating folks. But it ties in with one of our committees, which is looking at all of the 52 lock houses along the Ohio River, which now 9 are public access use. The folks have committed to have the Army Corps do property assessments and photographs and current status of each of the lock houses up and down the river. Turns out Mark, I'll get his name, Mark Wolotsky, his wife is property manager for the Ohio district. And so that's coming together. Anyway, this is May 25th, and would love to have all of us participate in that. And so that's just that topic. Our next topic really is sort of, well, are there any questions about the webinar series? There's an opportunity, we can recommend others. So we'd love to recommend others. Orsenko, it's a good deal for Orsenko. It sort of puts a positive spin on Orsenko's public outreach. So I'm a fan of it. Plus, they're just wonderful to work with. The facilitation, they're just good people. So if other people have topics, certainly let us know. I want to call on Harry a little bit and maybe to expand this more to just in this Ohio River Basin inspection tour, and what is it and how we might interact with it and why we might interact with it, or are there any other updates from ORBA?
Okay, so I'm on.
You're on.
So the Ohio River Basin Inspection Tour is a comes out of the 1928 Flood Control Act that mandates that the Mississippi River Commission, which is a presidential commission, inspect the rivers of the Mississippi River Basin, which is inclusive of the Ohio River and the Tennessee River and so forth. And so this is a congressionally mandated inspection by the Mississippi River Commission. This year, the inspection is going to be in the Ohio River Basin in what's being called the Ohio River Basin Inspection Tour, or ORBIT. I am in communications with General Whittle's office that is planning this event. General Whittle is one of the commissioners on the Mississippi River Commission. And we have been given the opportunity to suggest folks to the Corps of Engineers. It's a Corps of Engineers call as to who will be invited, and it will be a limited number this year due to COVID that can be stakeholders who can speak to the Corps of Engineers about the issues in the Ohio River Basin and how the Corps could engage in solving those problems. So it's Corps focused, but they very much want to hear about the plan for the Ohio River Basin. And so what I have asked is that we of the steering committee, and which includes, of course, our working group leaders, is to see if there are some folks from various parts of the basin, like near Pittsburgh, near Huntington, near Cincinnati, near Paducah, who would be able to speak to particularly their working group interest, but even then to be able to provide some examples on the ground of how the Corps either has been helpful in this in regard to, let's say, recreation, outdoor recreation, or how they could be helpful, what we would like from the Corps of Engineers. And so particularly if it's individuals that represent larger groups, that's very helpful. Although somebody who is just a good speaker about what's going on in their area would also be a great speaker. So I'll be glad to answer any questions, but that's what the ask is from me.
So the bottom line is, if anybody here, there's 4 sessions. And so if somebody has the drive and the passion to go through with that, they're in August, I think. Isn't that what you said, Harry?
The exact dates are still being worked out. I think they're in September. So the details are still to be worked out. I hope to know something within the next few days. They had a meeting of the core leadership this last Friday. And so I think that some decisions have been made, and I should be able to share more than I can at this point.
You know, it's fascinating to me that the Corps is the largest provider of outdoor recreation on the water in the United States. And it's true in our basin. So when we think about recreation, the Corps is actively engaged, more so than the National Park Service even. Just amazing to me. So if anybody's interested in that, we have Rita just raised her hand. And so if anybody's interested, please get with me and I'll forward everything and have a discussion with Harry about what we need to do to present that. Any other ORBA items, Harry?
You know, there are a ton of details I could go into. We're working on our communications with the legislators. We have put together a letter that's going tomorrow to the legislators in support of the infrastructure bill that is being developed, specifically talking about the water resource infrastructure stuff. And within that is a specific ask for within the resilience part of that, which talks about the Great Lakes initiative. It talks about the Everglades initiative. And so we have put in a request that basically says we are supportive of those, but we would like $300 million per year to be dedicated to the Ohio River Basin Restoration Initiative. We certainly are glad for the others, but you know, we're going to do a little shaming because this is going to our legislators to say it's our turn to get the funding. And then we do include all of the other things, the stormwater and drinking water and wastewater and locks and dams and ports and everything else that is in that bill. We just say we are supportive of it. And then
I was just going to say one other project is the PAS project with the Corps, where they've committed to develop a gap analysis from West Point to Portsmouth, Ohio, as a demonstration of what could a gap analysis look like for access to the river.
Yes, and we did have a meeting that is still kind of getting underway. They're gathering their data, but yes, that work is definitely underway. The GIS is another piece of that. So the Corps has actually stepped forward and said that they would provide the platform for the basin-wide GIS initiative that other people could put their data layers onto. And so Richard Harrison is working on that. And then the third piece of the PAS is the water resource management piece. And that one is truly just getting underway.
Thank you very much, Harry. Any questions for Harry? At some time, I've had a couple people ask about the other working groups and getting a status of the other working groups. And so the suggestion has been made that if there's a way of having a common meeting that everybody can sit in front of the computer again for another hour and learn what the other working groups are doing, it would be appreciated. So at some time you can bring that up the line.
Okay, it's certainly planned for the summit, but
And the summit is when? So the summit is at Thomas More University, Northern Kentucky?
That's correct. It's October 6th, 7th, and 8th.
Put it down on everybody's agenda, because the week before, or the weekend before, the 2nd and the 3rd, is really a celebration of the National Park Service, River Trails and Conservation Assistance Programs along the Ohio River. And so we have a deal down at West Point. So we could have a river-related week. Thank you. I want to call on Russ Clark next. We have sort of some committees, which that's how work in this thing gets done. So Russ, we'd love to hear your thoughts and 2 cents about what you just did. Do you mind if I share the thing you sent me?
If you'd like, it's fine. It's very brief. David asked me to look into the database that the National Park Service Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program has related to projects within the Ohio River Basin. And thanks to Bridget providing me with the GIS boundary, I was able to pass that on to the folks who coordinate our database. And as a result of that, we have found that there are 300 projects that RTCA has been involved with within the basin since 2000. And of those 300 projects, 15 are currently active. The others are either closed out or completed. And when I say closed or completed, every project's different. The scope of work is different. Sometimes projects just do fizzle out and don't actually get to the point of actually being able to implement anything. Other projects carry right on through to implementation. So data-wise, we've had 300 projects over the last 20 years with our program just within the Ohio River Basin area, which covers parts of 15 different states, and that's 15 different field offices.
And so one of the things I've asked Harry or asked Russ to continually think about is, what is the economic impact of those 300 projects? And what might the next 10 years be if there were more funding? And where the funding came from for those 300 projects, or how many of them even went forward. So it's almost an evaluation of that piece within the basin. But one piece that I'm fascinated with, which I just heard at random at a previous Zoom email or Zoom conference, that some of these projects, because right now, all these projects are technical assistance.
That's right.
But some of the projects, like down along the Gulf of Mexico, because FEMA has declared it an emergency area, actually get funds to implement some of them. So
right.
if the Gulf is in emergency time, I think the Ohio River Basin is in emergency time. It's just go ahead.
I would just comment to that. If FEMA comes in because of flooding or other natural disasters, that funding follows.
So any flooded city who has an RTCA grant application might be able to receive funds from that.
It starts with FEMA. And if it's it's an impact that brings FEMA in, and FEMA requests RTCA assistance, which they are doing more and more now with the Southeast region. We now have dedicated staff to assist FEMA with projects. And we help prepare the recovery plans based on recreation activities. So we will meet with the community, assess the situation, reach out to the community, brainstorm ideas, put together master plan concepts for parks and lands that have been devastated that are used for recreation purposes.
Anyway, I hope Russ can spend some more time on this to really think about the future of it. And, I'd like all of us to really think about how we can support the National Park Service in this planning pieces, because it's quite amazing to me that there's that many projects in our basin, that a lot of them are locally funded. And it's great technical assistance. Any other thoughts for Russ? I've asked Perry to give us an update a little bit on Blue Ways, Blue Trails, and funding.
Thanks, David. Some of you know I'm chair of our Funding Water Trails Committee, and recently I was inspired to reach out to Russ Barnett, who is chair of the Blueways Greenways Committee for this group, and ask him if he would like to collaborate. And we are talking about that, so stay tuned for messages from Russ and me about future collaborations. As we do so, we are planning to develop an Esri story map that highlights water trails as well as blueways and greenways around the basin and how those have been funded. One source of inspiration for me recently was a presentation I saw last week at the National Water Quality Monitoring Conference that brings together agency partners and state partners to think about good monitoring and how it contributes to protecting water quality. There was a presentation about the proposed Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor multi-use Greenway Blueway Trail. Have any of you heard of this before? But it's a collaboration of the National Park Service and a number of other federal partners, as well as people on the ground who have generated a grassroots effort to improve water quality through the establishment of this cultural heritage trail, and they're calling it a Greenway Blueway Trail. I can put a link to YouTube of the presentation. I have it at 7 minutes is when the presentation starts, if any of you are interested. And if you just Google Gullah Geechee Cultural Trail, you'll get there too. So that's it from me, David.
Thank you, Perry. Mr. Rudder, just to call on you out of the blue, I did talk to Perry, to Risa. Oh, Risa's here too. I thought you couldn't be here, Risa. Risa and Perry, any comments from the GIS collaboration that you're working through?
I do not, because we didn't meet because I couldn't establish the bandwidth to organize a meeting this month. That's about it. But I did put something in the chat for others' input. I learned this week, I'm kind of out of it, I guess, but there's something called the MAPS Act. So it's 1 year old, and it's a legislative initiative that supports mapping of public lands. So that includes public access to lands. So it's not just like public property. And it's geared towards hunting, fishing, and lake boundaries. So I don't know if anybody else has, that seems like a perfect thing for us. I don't know if Richard is dealing with that with the larger GIS initiative, but for our digital guide initiative, if there's some way we can leverage that legislation to some kind of funding, that would be great. First time I'd heard of it, and it's a year old. So I just threw it in the chat for others who are on my committee, and I will promise for us to reconvene. But we met 2 months ago or last month and are on the same trajectory, 3-pronged approach or 2-level approach. One is using the platform and infrastructure of the National River Recreation Database that's behind the National Rivers Project. And the other 2 are augmenting the Ohio River Recreation Trail, which is currently the Ohio River, but adding tributaries to that. And then also the Tennessee Long River Line project, which themselves are big chunks of data, but only portions of the whole basin. So we would fill in the gaps with the National River Recreation Database. So that's not new, though. It's not new, though.
Seth Wheat or David Rudder, do you have anything else to add? Okay, Mr. Wheat, you want to recap what we talked about or other initiatives?
We had a good sort of introductory meeting with some new and familiar faces over at Fish and Wildlife this morning. David and I did, and I didn't realize all the folks that they were going to bring on board. So we've got several items to follow up with about them, to follow up with them, and then I'll try to convene Trish and try to get Will Adams back in, maybe get a couple of those folks we met with today and Billy back together and talk about some things coming up. The big one is National Trails Day, Free Fishing Day, a couple other things that are happening the first weekend of June. Even if we don't have anything ourselves, or just it's easy to piggyback on different groups that are doing things that weekend to help get a little free publicity for hunting, fishing, and paddle sports education type stuff. And Reese, it's interesting you shared that with us today about the mapping. That just came across my radar a couple of weeks ago too, from another organization who's I'm just on one of their email lists, and you just cycle through those mindless emails you get all day long. And I'd never heard of that either. I forwarded that to the folks that work in our Commonwealth Office of Technology, kind of the head honchos for our state GIS work, who they do fantastic work, but I'm not very well versed in it, but it's very interesting, and it's something I'm kind of exploring more now too.
Yeah, well, we'll be in touch, because I think there's an opportunity there. I haven't figured out what it is. Thanks.
It seems to me that's a space that is becoming I don't know if crowded is the right word, but there are a lot of entities working on this, some of them for-profit, some of them governmental entities, but it would be nice to have some forethought in that, anytime you can get that all under one roof, I think, and have multiple layers and multiple different types of recreations. You don't have to jump around from app to app to app, from service to service. Having all that in one place could be something that could be tremendously valuable, I think. But anyway, I'm done rambling now, David. Sorry.
Thank you, Seth. Anyone else? I do have one more final request. We have we're right at 5 o'clock. But the final request is that we're going to have to come up with a report at some time. And these drafts are going to be being done during the summertime. And so what we're really looking for is these ideas, and any numbers you can put to them, the better. And any links to existing funding sources, or if there is no funding source. And so we want to start to gather these big ideas and put something in writing sometime soon, in the next 3 months. Harry, any comment on that, or is there any, there really hasn't been a time frame set?
No, it's just a matter of figuring out what the big priorities are, what the cost would be for them, and where traditionally money has come from, or is it a gap?
And so those start to think about putting some ideas into paper and sharing them with everybody. I wish to thank everybody for this time, and please get outdoors for the rest of the day. We started off with this piece of saying, what would you rather be doing? Go do it now. Thank you very much.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.